Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second half of day one of the Digital Investment Week. Get ready to dive into a power-packed panel session on the Asia digital outlook, venture capital predictions, and dynamics that drive them. So moderating this session is Dr. Nikolai Dobberstein, partner, Kearney Inc., Malaysia. Over to you, Dr. Nikolai.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm very excited to host this venture capital session. We have some great VC representatives here today, successful, award-winning, very familiar with Malaysia. So let me briefly introduce them. Jeffrey Paine, the founding partner of Golden Gate Ventures out of Singapore, $175 million under management, invested in 45 companies in Southeast Asia. He's also the founder and manager of the Founder Institute in Singapore. You have Thomas Tsao, the founding partner and chairman of Gobi Ventures, now based out of Malaysia. Thomas co-founded Gobi Partners in 2002 and has been named one of China's top VCs. Tom also leads the Alibaba Hong Kong Entrepreneurs Fund, relocated to KL in 2015, and has set up several venture funds with MFCAP. We have Khailee, the managing partner of 500 Startups, a major Silicon Valley-based venture capital firm. Khailee is both a prolific investor, over 180 investments in Southeast Asia, and a serial entrepreneur himself. And we have Victor Chua, the founding and managing partner of Vynn Capital here in Malaysia, a VC fund that focuses on early stage companies in Southeast Asia. He was also the former chairman of the Malaysian Venture Capital and Private Equity Association. Truly a preeminent panel of leading venture capitalists here in the region. Now let's go and hear from them. We will have three focus areas in our discussion. First, an overview of the broader technology trends and startup and VC opportunities. Secondly, we will talk more specifically about Malaysian VC opportunities and the Malaysian startup ecosystem. And thirdly, we will talk about how the current volatile times impact VC management and what the impact of the COVID pandemic is. Now let's start with the first, technology trends and startup and VC opportunities. The question I really have to our panel members is, what technology trends are impacting the startup scene? Where are you seeing the most startup opportunities today? What we'll do is we do a round robin, 3-4 minutes each, and we will start with Jeffrey. Jeffrey, please go ahead.
Thank you, Nikolai. Thank you all for having me. I think the trends are not much different from a few years ago. I think fintech is extremely strong. I think I would put fintech as number one. It's extremely strong. Judging from our pipeline, judging from the last few deals that we did, and also judging from the latest large rounds that you guys have seen, fintech is still pushing pretty strong. Then the second one I would say is any software that helps businesses, but in, I would say, SME or micro SMEs, not really larger enterprises, so more business software. But the timing is a little bit slow. I think the adoption and the willing to pay and the willing to experiment, take risks, that will take a bit of time. But we all know that they need it, especially in the last 2 years. And the sort of the far-flung industries that are changing, like agriculture, education, and healthcare, these are the three that will gradually adopt technology. However, they're really large and it takes a long time to penetrate. So investors in those three areas needs to take a bit of time, and they need to be more patient. And then we are always open to look at deep tech opportunities, but then for the last 15 years, not many have done well, financially. But as VCs, we are always keen to see what kind of deep tech opportunities we can back and we can assist. Yeah. So that's my take.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Tom, what's your view on the opportunities?
Yeah, no, I think Jeff did a great outline, so I'm not going to go into there. I'm going to take it, Nikolai, from a slightly different perspective. I think one of the big technology trends will be, one is as kind of the China and US get into more competition, I think Southeast Asia is going to be the big beneficiary. And I think, Nikolai, when you were talking about some of the things that you were doing back in 1996, setting up Malaysia, I think a lot of that's going to come to fruition. I think, and because the timing is right now. And I think, again, even more short term with the headlines around DD, I think I'm sure for Khailee, Victor, and Jeff, a lot of people I'm talking to in China and the US, all of a sudden there's been more risk, I think, around these big Chinese internet companies, and people are looking to put their money somewhere else. I think, relatively speaking, China and India were what I used to call the big black holes, right? They were sucking in all the investment because they're huge. Southeast Asia sometimes got overlooked. And I think for everybody on this panel here, we were early believers. Nikolai, you were even earlier than all of us, believers in Southeast Asia. I think it's going to come. I think the timing couldn't be better. I think Southeast Asia, there's going to be, I hate to over exaggerate, but I think just the renewed interest in Southeast Asia. It already happened before, right? With the big SPACs, the big IPOs, the unicorns. I think now, given what happened with the US and China, now when you look at relative risk, I think everything in Southeast Asia is going to be revalued. The multiples for Southeast Asia used to trade at a discount to China and India. No longer. I think we're going to revalue, and I think all of us here should be feeling pretty good. And I think if you're an entrepreneur out there, no better time to be an entrepreneur in Southeast Asia than now.
No, thanks, Tom. It's good to hear that we have finally some good news coming to Southeast Asia, because we've been waiting for quite a long time, since the mid-90s. Khailee, your view.
Yeah, so just to make the conversation additional as well, we can also look at trends from a different perspective. For us, because we have to make investment decisions on who to back and where do we think some of the biggest deals are coming from. I want to cite from one of the researchers we've done called the GSG study. So what we did was that we tried to observe what happened to China after the BAT came public, right? So when Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent became the size that they were, a lot of folks were afraid that Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent would just eat up all the startups, right? But what had happened after they became so big was actually really interesting for China. Over 160 new unicorns came around from China since then. This year alone, we have to update our stat because there's just so many unicorns happening this year alone. But out of the 160 we studied at a slice of time that we did, here's the interesting thing. 40% of those unicorns were also backed by Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. So when you think about Southeast Asia, we also have the top 3 giants as well. We have our equivalent of BAT. We call them the GSG. You got Grab, you got C Limited, you got GoTo. So these 3 folks, they're going to be having a huge impact on the Southeast Asia scene for 3 reasons. Number one, a lot of their staff members will have liquidity from their public stock. They may be involved in angel investing. Some of them may want to become entrepreneurs. Number 2, is that GSG, the differences between GSG and BAT, right, just to mark the differences, is that BAT had kind of a little bit different revenue sources, whereas that GSG has some of the more overlapping ones. And because of that, it's going to actually drive up more competition. Consumers here may be excited about promo codes. I don't know, but it may result in driving more digital adoption as a result. So the total size of money coming through digital services will increase. More folks will be onboarded. So the second thing. Now, the third and final thing is that with the impact of the GSG is that we'll start to have one critical evidence point for more investment to flow in here, which is exits. That is the missing link, right, for Southeast Asia to have the rest of the world's capital have the check boxes required to flow into the region, which is supersized exits. So with that in mind, it does affect us a lot as a firm as we see how we actually get our deals from, because we're quite fortunate that out of the probably 10 companies, that is going plans to go public this year, our 2014 vintage happened to have Carsem, Grab, Carousel, FinExcel, Bukalapak, and a Hong Kong company, Prenetics, which I think, Tom, you're part of as well. So these 6 companies, because they're planning to go public or have announced plans to go public at more than $1 billion, to grab up to 40, it really makes a proof point as well for our investors that to cut 21 checks in 2014 and have 6 companies go public at more than $1 billion, it proves at least by a cohort analysis of vintage by vintage, we can start to kind of trend line 2015, 16, 17, mark the differences, but all of this builds investor confidence. The combination of GSGs, getting money in, attracting money into the ecosystem, pushing talent into the ecosystem, and investors getting all of these check boxes in is going to have a renaissance for the ecosystem. And that trend, that mega trend, if you will, Southeast Asia in and of itself is the mega trend.
Thanks, Khailee. Sounds really, I think 2014 must have been a fantastic vintage.
It's a great vintage. But I hope 2015 and 16 can compare, right? Hopefully we didn't get worse at picking deals.
2014 wasn't so good in wine, but 2016 was great. Anyhow, Victor, your view.
Points. I think since Khailee brought up about CARSOM, definitely we think that markets that were previously underlooked, or at least people were not paying too much attention to, are now becoming a hot market, like Malaysia, for example. The fact that we have companies like CARSOM, where I think out of the 4 panelists, 3 of us have benefited from it. I think that speaks quite loud for the Malaysian ecosystem, especially coming from Malaysia itself. So I think my first observation is that there'll be a lot more focus on markets that were previously overlooked. Saying that, that also links to my second observation, which is the fact that industries or sectors that were previously not sexy is now becoming hot. I have to say that because coming from a very sector specialist kind of VC firm, we think that industries like supply chain and mobility will become even more important, especially in current environment where things are just not being distributed effectively or efficiently. So we think that being sector focused would actually help drive better yield, better return for this asset class in general. And because of the sectorial nature of a lot of more new investors that's emerging, that's why a lot of the traditional money will be poured into these asset class as well. And that's also a reason why I think there will be a lot more activities, a lot more exits, a lot more big money, and even the old money is going to become smart money as well, as all of us are becoming more familiar with this particular investment opportunity for most of the traditional asset classes or investors. Yeah, that's for me.
Thanks, Victor. And I definitely will come back. Is Malaysia one of those overlooked markets? No, and I think it would be good to get a view. But maybe let's just really go into the Malaysian market and the VC opportunities and ecosystem you see here. And I think probably I want to center the questions around 3 focus areas. The first one is really, what are focus areas for investment here in Malaysia? The second is, how do you see the ecosystem? And third is obviously, how do you see the talent strength for startups? Because obviously you're not investing in technology, you're also investing into talent. So what I will do is I will just call on several of you to comment on these 3 areas, and then I think go through all areas quickly and then have a broader discussion. But let's start with the investment focus areas. Thomas, I think as a regional VC, Gobi partners, what are you focusing on here in Malaysia in terms of investments, and how do you compare this to other markets?
Yeah, thank you, Nikolai. And again, I'd echo, I think, what Khailee and Victor and Jeff has said. In fact, I think we all are big believers in that technology is going to reinvent how we buy cars. So essentially, e-commerce for mobility, I think, is completely going to change. And I think, Jeff's backing another guy, but I think, broadly speaking, the big opportunity now is kind of, you think about e-commerce has affected everything, like how we buy phones, consumer electronics, fashion. Those same trends are now sweeping through how we interact and buy with autos. Right? I mean, if you think about how we bought autos in the past, it hasn't changed for like 50, 80 years. And I think now, I think, Nikolai, you may have seen the big auto manufacturers are rethinking how they're going to sell cars. Are they going to go to like this Apple model where they're going to take the dealerships back? How come they haven't sold digitally online? So I think companies like CARSOM are at a very interesting point where they can reinvent how cars are purchased. I foresee a day, and in fact, it was the CARSOM management who told me, they were like, hey, listen, one day, why can't you have one site where you can go to rent a car, buy a used car, or buy a new car, and then eventually lease it out to an autonomous infrastructure so the car can make money for you when you're not using it? And I was like, whoa, that's huge. we better put more money into Carsum, and I'm sure Jeff's thinking I got to put more money into Caro, right? But that whole sector is growing, and you could roll this out across all the markets in Southeast Asia. So I think that's one sector, right? Another sector, I think Jeff already mentioned, love fintech. All right, fintech, so much going on. I think Southeast Asia is really experimenting. We love fintech, particularly in insurtech. I think banking, there's been a lot of great things done. I think insurtech, insurance companies, they do a great job, but I mean, when's the last customer you've met who said, I have a great relationship with my insurance company? I mean, it's just, something needs to happen, and I think there's all sorts of opportunities there. They're sitting on so much data, but again, the traditional insurance model has been, man, they hard sell you on something for something you may or may not need, and then when you need to get the insurance, they find all sorts of excuses not to give it to you. Look, that's the traditional model. I'm not saying all insurance companies are like that, but to me, when I hear that, that means that's an industry that could use innovation. And there's a lot of guys going after that. So I think that's interesting. Now, the third one for us is logistics. Love it. Love logistics, anything around logistics, moving, people, moving goods, e-commerce. You can't have e-commerce without logistics. So, I mean, roughly for us, those are three big opportunities we see.
And Tom, do you see this also in Malaysia? Is this a broader regional trend, or is it also very specific to Malaysia? Where do you see the nuances here in Malaysia?
Well, I think for Malaysian companies, I think the entrepreneurs, and I've said this, they're fantastic at going regional. The skill set here, because they're connected, right? Multilingual, have the experience of managing multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious. Malaysia's bigger than Singapore, so you can do some cool things, but it's not so big that you only think locally. You have to go regional. And again, there's all sorts of great people here who are connected to what I call the 5 big opportunities that Malaysia can connect into, right? India, China, Indonesia, the West, and this greater Taqwa tech opportunity, right? The global Muslim economy. You can find it all here in Malaysia.
Oh, nice. Good to hear this. Maybe let's talk a bit about the investment and VC ecosystem here in Malaysia. Jeffrey, I think you're obviously a Singapore-based VC. I think, how strong do you see the investment and VC ecosystem here? And because we frequently hear, and I think there's always the lamenting in Malaysia, that the startups leave for Singapore due to better investment climate, broader talent base, better government policies. How true is this? And if it's true, what needs to get done to change this?
Actually not true. So I'm not sure what you're hearing. It's not true. Only a few actually move their HQ to Singapore. Most of them are still in Malaysia, right? As all of the my counterparts are in KL, you're aware. Maybe I'll just give you some stats. And I will probably say this a bit more throughout the session. And Khailee already started, with showing data. I think the largest companies so far in the last 12, 15 years in Southeast Asia, I can give you the stats. 92% of them are based in Singapore, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Yeah, it's about 3% that are actually based in Malaysia. Their key markets, majority of them, at least I would say 70% is Southeast Asia or Indonesia. In fact, most of them are Indonesia only. They're not even out of Indonesia. So that means very simple. I think most people who are raising money, they are able to raise money if they are Sdn Bhd, or if somebody requests them to be Singapore Private Limited, they probably will, but they will still have the Sdn Bhd, right? Now, how does that matter to the government? I think that's another story altogether. But that's the way things are right now. But I think Malaysian companies are quite, just have to understand they don't have to move their HQ. They just need to expand to more countries. That's literally it. Yeah.
No, thanks, Jeffrey. Good to hear. Victor, your view, I think, what's your view on obviously you're intimately involved here on the VC and investment ecosystem. What are the strengths? What else can be done? You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about it. Yeah, I think maybe to answer that question, let me first break down the Malaysian VC ecosystem by phase, in terms of time. Obviously, I mean the reason why I'm saying that is because to me, a startup ecosystem's strength, it depends on the tool that we use to empower them. And I do think that VC is a very important tool in empowering entrepreneurship and empowering the startup ecosystem in any single markets. So for Malaysia, when we first had a VC industry, it was mainly local investors investing into local companies, investing into local so-called technology firms, based on the time back then. And that's why companies like MathCap were born. That's why companies like MDAC Cradle were created to actually support the whole ecosystem. But as the market matures, that's where we start to see a lot more investment into attracting foreign players to come invest into Malaysia. That's why we got people like 500 Startups. That's why Khailee started to join, started to become active in the VC industry because of 500 Startup. And that's how we managed to get people like Tom to come to Malaysia. I mean, it's very difficult to get Gobi. It's very difficult to get Tom coming from China to Malaysia. But we managed to hit that stage. And then you move on to where we are at right now, where we have a lot more local homegrown VCs coming out to start investing into local companies. But that didn't stop us. And a lot of the local VCs are now investing across the borders to look at the region as a whole. Because we know that as Malaysian, as what Tom alluded, we are not really a big market. But the advantage or the strength that Malaysia has is the talent that we have, the diversity that we have, and the ability for us to execute. And that's why a lot of the companies, even though they are based in Malaysia, but they are quietly going out across the borders. Even from our portfolio companies, obviously Carson is one of the most successful cases, but we do have smaller companies, earlier stage companies, Series A companies that has been able to execute their expansion strategy perfectly in overseas market. In fact, the fact that we have been able to see new opportunities in the underserved markets like Sabah, for example, that's a sign that the Malaysian market is actually maturing to a sense. Not to say maturing to a bottleneck, but at least we see a lot more opportunities out there, and definitely we do see that there's more and more activities going on within the market in Malaysia. To give an example, one of our investee is actually a Sabah-based company. In fact, that's the first Sabah startup that got funded by a VC, and they recently raised around by the Sabah State PE Fund. So that shows that even local investors are actually putting more effort in building the local ecosystem. And these are the companies that are raising money to expand the markets to beyond just Malaysia itself. So I think overall, if you ask me, obviously I could be biased, but Malaysia definitely have a very strong ecosystem. And I think the next thing we need to do is figure out how do we actually work together as a multi-stakeholder environment. We need to be able to work together cohesively to actually grow the companies over there.
Yeah, just maybe one question to you, Victor. One thing.
Sorry, Nikolai, you're on mute. Was it? Oh no, you're not. Yeah.
I could hear him.
Yeah. So one of the things which always puzzled me in Malaysia for so many years, I always heard there's not enough funding, and whenever you look at statistics, there's enough funds available. But I think one comes always out, and even from the government perspective, you often know we need to inject more funds. But I look at you. I look at the numbers, and it looks absolutely well sized. Why is that happening?
I think it's not a matter of how much money is there. Obviously, money is never enough. We as VCs, we have to constantly go out to fundraise for our portfolio companies, for ourselves. It's a full-time job. Especially after coming out, I definitely learned a lot from Tom, and now I'm doing it. So it's not an easy task. But I think the biggest problem over here is how efficient are we in distributing capital? How efficient are we in empowering VCs to go out there to empower the next generation of entrepreneurs? And that's where that's the problem that we got to solve. Because it doesn't matter how much cash you have stashed up at the back of your storeroom or whatever it is. If it doesn't get out there, it just doesn't get out there. So in order for you to grow the ecosystem, you need to focus on supply chain. That's where Tom and myself, we are looking at logistics. We need to invest in supply chain for businesses, just like how government or every one of us need to figure out how do we make sure this supply chain of capital is efficient enough.
Nice. Thank you, Victor. Khailee, I think let's talk a little bit about the talent strength in Malaysia. Obviously, you represent 500 startups, global VC. How do you see sort of the startup and tech talent in Malaysia? It's clear that we have good talent. No, I think we have created some highly successful startup unicorns. I think just listening to some of you earlier, it sounds well we have it. I think the question is, do we have enough breadth and depth, and how do you see it, and how is it impacting your investment decisions?
Okay, so I guess like the perspective we take, knowing that we're right now as a firm, we're in 2,500 investments in 77 countries. And when our various partners come together and have these types of conversations, we try to have some common language to discuss this aspect. Now, what we have come around to is to observe talent, not so much as a national talent, but where the talent routes exist. So what do I mean? So I'll share you some interesting things that's happening just use the Malaysia case since you're more curious about it. When I was building my companies, when I was an entrepreneur, we had engineers at the time. There weren't enough Ruby on Rails engineers. That was a language that was used at the time. But we hired from overseas. We had Indonesian engineers, we had Vietnamese engineers, and eventually we hired a Syrian. His name is Iyad. And here's a really funny thing, right? So Iyad came in and he's like, "Hey, wow, this is a sweet gig, like this Malaysia's great versus what's going on in Syria at the time." So he creates this Facebook group which helps Syrians come to Malaysia. So he became like a one person. And so eventually Iyad worked at iFlix, and a huge amount of the iFlix engineering team are from Syria. So suddenly you've got this Syrian talent route of Syrians coming into Malaysia all of a sudden, powering a lot of the engineering for some of the more prominent Malaysian companies at the time, right? Fave, for example, and all that, just come from the same talent route. So now what's happening in Southeast Asia and also for Malaysia, I had a talk with an Australian entrepreneur recently who's worked all around the world, and very experienced operator. And he chose Malaysia, and he had his own rationale behind it. We've seen a lot of German entrepreneurs, Asia Venture Group, Tim Mabak, Kai Cooks, a lot of the early folks who built Happy Fresh, who's built iPrice, who built iMoney, and all of these companies, they chose Malaysia too. So if you look at the successful talent routes, one way is like coming in. But here's the second way to look at Malaysian talent and talent routes. Grab is popularly marketed as a Singaporean company, but its roots are Malaysian, as everyone here knows, right? Now, when I was first working with Huiling and Anthony at the time, they didn't have a tech team. So I was like, look, they were outsourcing the tech to India. I said, look, let's first start by getting our own tech team, right? So I called up a buddy, Suthan, and Suthan joined, right? And then Suthan later got Aaron and a lot of these folks in. But Suthan, till today, Suthan Thomas, a Malaysian graduate from MMU, who was a debate coach there, he's in Singapore, right? And he's still there as like a head of their engineering as well. So if you look at Suthan over there, it's not just Suthan. There's Kearney, who right now he's constantly getting promoted. So I don't know what his latest role is, but last I hear he's running all of the financial, the Grab's financial group. Now Kearney is from my school, SMKDJ, right? Eric from Carson is also from my school, SMKDJ. Huiling is from SMDU. These are local government schools. There's nothing special about these schools. These are everyday schools, everyday Malaysians. I can go on. Carousel is a Singaporean company, but there's a Malaysian founder, Lucas, from Ipoh, And so the Malaysians are everywhere. They're in Google, they're in Facebook, they're in Lyft, I've got a tracker of all these Malaysians overseas in the US. I had my own Facebook group at the time when Facebook was a thing. But now here in Southeast Asia, all of the top unicorn companies are stacked with Malaysian talent. And just wait till like their shares become liquid or they're itching to start something or be part of something. Just wait for that, right? So that is what I'll have to say about talent routes coming into Malaysia and talented Malaysians going around. So that is a lens that you can use to observe Malaysian talent. I don't know if it's just me. Is it me? I can't hear.
You're on mute.
I was on mute. Yeah, sorry, Khailee. I think so. No, I think very interesting to listen to that, Khailee. It is clear to me that Malaysia has great talent. We are also looking consulting. We have to get top talent, and we get top talent. I think the question is what is needed probably to make sure that I think it benefits of Malaysia more directly. Maybe I think what you're describing is interesting because now they might be exiting, they might have money and might put this back into Malaysia. Maybe good to hear from others how you see the Malaysian.
You know, if I can kind of connect that, just close that loop here, right? Like benefiting Malaysia, it's all about ownership. Why? Malaysian taxpayer money has to grow. Like our pensions, like our pensions over here, they've got to deliver 6% a year, right? So if you're nursing all of these companies and you have talented Malaysians working all around the world building these amazing companies, but the Malaysian state, right, the Ministry of Finance and its associated entities and its pensions and sovereign wealth funds have a minority ownership of the biggest companies over here, that is the biggest mistake any nation can make. You build the roads, you build the hospitals, you build the schools, you build years of momentum to build this talent and opportunity, and you do not even own. Like, what is a cap table ownership linked to Malaysian benefit for Carsem, for Grab, for Carousel, for Finexcel, Bukalapak, all regional companies, local companies? Like, what is that ownership? That is the question to ask. Ownership, 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 right? And I'm proud to say that because of MavCap, which is owned by Ministry of Finance, which had backed Thomas, which had backed me, which had backed Victor. Good thing we had MavCap, right? Like MavCap, like I'll say that a third of our funds are Malaysian capital of our earlier funds. Like I wish it was like 90%, right? But it's like a third. But a lot of that because of MavCap and a lot of other visionary family offices and visionary tycoons, like at least Malaysia has some of that ownership, that financial benefit from all this activity, right? So that's the closed loop over here. Build ownership in your talent. Build ownership in your tech. And that means investing in them.
Nice, good to hear. Other comments from anyone on the Malaysian ecosystem? Good, Thomas, there's a question, maybe I just take the question as it comes, and before we move on, I think which industry you think will grab more investment and why? Obviously, I think when you talked about, I think the e-commerce mobility, fintech, logistics, insurtech, I think very people getting interesting. So which of the question is to you, Thomas, which industry you think will grab more investments and why?
You mean among those three?
I'm not fully sure. I just took the questions as Pravina forwarded to me, but I assume.
Well, I think, again, I think of those three, look, I like all three of them, but I think if you had to pick one, I guess putting me on the spot, maybe I'll get some support here from Jeff. I think fintech is just touching everything. And in a sense, if you think about even Carsem also has a fintech angle, right? Because when you buy a car, can you do buy now, pay later? I don't know. How do you get the insurance? So if I had to choose one, I just think fintech touches everything. Even for the logistics companies, there's sort of a fintech angle. So if I had to choose one, I don't know if that answers the question. I think fintech, and it's just because, again, I think industries that traditionally have enjoyed some sort of regulatory protection, they're the last industries, right, that are facing now the disruption coming from the internet, mobile phones. And if I had to say two sectors after, I think what happened in, how you buy autos, same thing is happening in prop tech. And then the final thing I'd argue, and I think we're all looking at it, I think the name for it is reg tech, is government itself is a big sector that hasn't really gone through a lot of innovation, right? And if you look at COVID, I mean, the government wants to help people and get checks to people. I mean, I know in the United States, they were still issuing paper checks. Why isn't that done off of a freaking e-wallet? So people, when the government passes the bill, people get their money tomorrow or within the hour, right? So I think, again, when you look at these big sectors that are going to that need to innovate, government, right? And I think one last one, I think we could all agree, the voting mechanism itself. Why isn't that online, with some sort of blockchain? You can't fake it I mean, these are all huge areas. So I think as a VC guy, when I think of these opportunities, there's so much to do. Sorry.
No, thanks. I won't go down the voting path for obvious reasons. But another question which popped up, and I use this as to float it. Maybe Jeffrey, I think there was a question about cryptocurrency. What you guys are thinking about cryptocurrency, in particular for Malaysia, because the the notion is that Malaysia might have some advantages as a hub for this industry. Any views from anyone? Maybe Jeffrey, maybe you want to start?
Yeah, for me, I think we do have a crypto fund since 2018. So I would say, yeah, the crypto world is not gonna, it's not gonna go away, and it's gonna be, it's gonna get stronger. It's just navigating through the noise. Malaysia and Thailand actually leads things that are happening in Singapore. Singapore used to boom in that area in 2017. It kind of softened down a little bit, but I think besides Singapore, I think Malaysia and Thailand has the two countries that are leading a little bit. So I would definitely look at it if you are a founder, looking at that area. Not all funds do invest in that area, just so that you guys understand. But if you are curious, there are enough people in Malaysia to kind of help you and guide you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. There was one more question, and then after that, I'll move on with our dialogue. But what do you guys think about B2B SaaS startups? Any insights from Southeast Asia?
Well, I'll just do a quick one. One of our early exits was TradeGecko. So that's a B2B SaaS startup. The unique opportunity of B2B SaaS startups is that you can be just global from day one, right? Because that's just the nature of B2B SaaS. But however, what I would say is that I think Malaysia can capitalize more on that, only because there are some very successful bootstrapped ones. One in Penang, PictoChart, who launched Picto Story. They continue to not require venture capital funding. There's another one, Radica in Ipoh. They've got customers like NASA and all that. It's just amazing companies. Cash flows are super tight. Unit economics typically, and the ease of globalization expansion of B2B SaaS that's great dynamic, right? So I think if, let's say, Malaysia is nurturing a sector, I think the crypto bet sounds like a good one. It definitely sounds like creating a haven for B2B SaaS entrepreneurs to build companies out of Malaysia on an island or something. That could be a radical idea to think about.
Good. No, thank you, Khailee. I think maybe let's talk about the current times. Obviously, I think we had 1.5 years of a pandemic. I think it has been unprecedented. It opened up new opportunities, but also challenges. I'm sure for you as investors, and definitely for some of the startups, I think we have an unprecedented emergence of micros. I think obviously people are trying new things, which could also lead to a very different startup scene. But now, so what do you see, and how? Maybe two perspectives. As a VC, how do you create sort of a sustainable and resilient portfolio in such times? Because obviously some of your portfolio companies will do well, some will struggle. And then the other side is, what do you advise startups or budding entrepreneurs to watch out for and prepare for? Because obviously these are difficult times. And maybe I think we do a little bit around robin here, because that's probably an important theme. Victor, you want to start?
Definitely. Overall, for the last 1.5 years of the COVID pandemic, it kind of further enforces our investment approach, our investment strategy. On hindsight, it's proven that what we do is effective, because from day one, we have always been focusing on investing into a specific ecosystem. We built our own portfolio of ecosystem together. Obviously you have the larger ecosystem, like a regional ecosystem, Malaysian ecosystem, but we focus on our own micro ecosystem where we invest into companies that are strategically adjacent to each other. Or in other words, we could actually create some sort of a synergy between one another. And that kind of worked for us. And because of that, some of our companies are able to expand into a new market just because we have invested into similar companies across the other side of the world, and that's how we provide the learning and we provide the partnership opportunity. For that particular example, I can raise is a Malaysian company called Droppy. Droppy, they were the second company that got into Y Combinator, and they have just launched, soft launch into Indonesia, because of the fact that we actually have a portfolio company in Indonesia that actually helps build a bridge for them. And they are also a B2B SaaS company. I think that reinforces the opportunity within that particular segment, within that particular industry, especially when they deal with one of the hardest industry, FMCG. A lot of FMCG guys are just super boring and they don't change. because of the fact that this is how we have been doing it for the last 50 years or 60 years, and that's why we don't change. But COVID has forced them to change. And that's why they serve some of the oldest clients like Spritzo, for example, the mineral water, even some of the older folks the larger brands from Indonesia, for example, are already on the platform. So that's what we think has worked out well for us. And in fact, if you look at some of the other companies that we have, I think this period of time has allowed them to think out of the box. Tom and Jeff talked about fintech, and of course, Tom mentioned about Carson going to, they are already in fintech as well. Some of our portfolio companies, they are also in the financing business because of the fact that they have a huge database of users, because of the fact that they're transacting huge volume. Droppy, for example, they partner up with UOB, they partner up with a few other financiers to actually do the lending business, so that we focus on what we are good at, which is on the data piece, and the financiers will focus on providing the capital. So that's where we see, and a lot more companies are trying to expand beyond their realm. And I think that relates to the advice that I would like to share with some of the startups and entrepreneurs, which is to not just eat your lunch, but you want to consider how do you want to eat your neighbor's dinner as well. Look at what someone else is doing and see if there is a way for you to work together. You share. You don't actually have to snatch the whole dinner over, but you can share. I think that's where entrepreneurs should learn how to think about beyond just doing what they have been doing for the last maybe 2-3 years, but also think about synergy. How do they strategically put themselves next to some other business model and get into a new realm, because this is the best time for you to actually take the risks.
Thank you, Victor. Khailee, your views.
Thanks.
Well, I think you were asking a lot about COVID and COVID response, and how do you kind of be relevant or additive, right, through these times. Well, first off, I'll say that so what society's been through and what we will go through, I think that with the ups and downs, right, of responses and economic opening up, closing up, and the virality or mutation of variants, these are things that I can't comment on, right? But I think that most people can agree is that we got to be prepared. Now, we've done a lot of COVID response research on how it affected V-shaped recoveries, like which sectors. We studied Zika, we studied SARS, right, and how it affected the regions that were affected. We look back on a lot of that, and I think that it was Tom, I think you and I were talking about, we were already mapping that Carson would make a spectacular V-shaped recovery, right? I think it was at one retreat that we're at, and so. And it's amazing. So I think there must be a different letter for V, where it just goes even higher than V, right, on the other end, right? I don't know what kind of Greek letter that is, but certain sectors will actually benefit tremendously. But more importantly is that a lot of these startups, they're actually relied upon to tide us through. Now, what do I mean? So I'll use a portfolio example of Bukalapak, right, which is going public in a couple of days, right? This Friday actually is the public date. Now, when COVID kind of hit, they're an e-commerce company, but I call them all-commerce company because a lot of their business is actually wiring up goods and services and financial services to all the rural areas throughout Indonesia. So they're more all-commerce company, as I call it. And what happened was that the government leaned on them to actually get information, get supplies, and it's because it's so hard for a government to have branches all across the country like Indonesia, right? So you lean on startups who have huge platforms. So what I remind a lot of our entrepreneurs is that as you grow in scale, you have as many customers as the water company or the power company of any country. You are actually a public service because you service so many members of the public, right? So, and it's true enough that because startups have this responsibility, and you see that with Grab right now as well. I've in touch with some of the charity work that my wife and I are involved in. We speak to folks in the PPR flat that I text some of the kids living here and say, how are you getting by? How's mom, right? And they're like, hey, thank God for Grab. Without Grab, we'd be starving, literally. At least I can still do Grab. I can still deliver stuff, right? And so these are very real day-to-day stuff. And all of these startups who are building things right now know that you're not just building for yourself. You're going to be relied on to innovate faster, create solutions, and partner with governments, partner with other aspects of society to actually create a more dynamic and resilient economy to prepare us for what's to come.
No, and I think I couldn't agree with you more. I think if we didn't have digital or platforms like Grab, I think our life would even be worse. No, I think, and it really made a difference because I think it helped. Jeffrey, your views.
I think this period, I just have probably two comments. One is for the founders to self-reflect and be a bit more self-aware. I think you need to fix yourself up a bit more. I think everyone is going through different kinds of anxiety. So even at our firm, we are doing a lot more executive coaching within the portfolios. We are launching a coaching initiative in Southeast Asia in a few months. So we want to make sure that the founders kind of take care of themselves first. And then the next thing is, especially in Malaysia and Indonesia, the next once you're once you're on the path to kind of achieving your goals, then please take care of your employees. I think employees now are also going through different tough times, and their families. So please make sure that happens. And if anything, whether reach out to your shareholders, reach out to investors, and make sure that you guys are all mentally prepared for pushing it through this year and next year.
So Jeffrey, just building on this, how do you advise? Because obviously it's difficult. No? I think some startups might be struggling, barely surviving, and you also have a responsibility. It's more so than ever. In these difficult times. Any advice to startups how to manage this in these challenging times and balance between the economic responsibility and the moral responsibility you are alluding to right now?
I think first and foremost, we are humans first. We're not here to find money, dig money, return money. We are humans first. So please make sure that your family, your employees' family are taken care of. Businesses or otherwise, there are always different ways to do this, right? I think back in March till July, we were all in the trenches, doing war room calls every few days with every single founder in the region, and trying to, and they themselves, probably, in fact, many founders gone through, this is their first time going through such situations, and many of them, reconfigure their plans, had to do major cut. Sometimes some of them have gone down, but that's the way things are, right? Business. We are here to help. If there's a way to prolong them and to kind of get them out of different situations, we will do that. But it's okay to pull the plug sometimes. So don't be too worried. We are all here for you. So the only advice I have is please have as many people surround you as you can, right? And just understand, coaching and advisors are different things, and being a CEO and doing a CEO is completely two different things, right? So be arm yourself with as much information as you can to push through. Right? We are all here for you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Tom, your views.
No, I think what Jeff just said really resonates, and I think for it's something we don't talk about is really just the mental health. I mean, even for the VC guys, I'm sure on the panel. I mean, this is, as much as we try to get amped up for these panels and everything, it's tough. I mean, for my family, and we're the lucky ones, right? I mean, think about the people on the front line. So we have no right to say anything, but no, just in general, it's tough. And then if you're an entrepreneur, I mean, even before COVID, it's like running around with your hair on fire. And now you got a once in a century pandemic that nobody knows how it's going to end. Yeah, it's tough. So again, like I think Jeff was saying, for all of us, and I know Khailee and Victor have also spoken about this, just the mental health. You got to take care of yourself first. But it does lead to again, where I see big innovations coming from. So again, at Gobi, we've been pushing really this concept around ESG and purpose-driven innovation. Because for me personally, what COVID has demonstrated is, we often get into this whole, pissing competition, who's got more unicorns, like, oh, who's got the bigger herd of unicorns, whatever. That's kind of cool. But at the end of the day, when you I think what Jeff was saying, it totally resonates. When you stop and take a step back, look, the thing I learned from COVID is if one part of the world is suffering, we all suffer. And so at some point, and if there's a silver lining in all this, I think VCs are really, one of the big technology trends that I think will come out, Nikolai, is there's going to be this revamped drive to use VC to solve some of these really global problems, right? We're calling it purpose-driven innovation. You can call it sustainability, ESG, whatever. But COVID's a wake-up call, because if guys like us aren't going to go solve some of these most difficult problems, what are we here for, right? So I think that you're seeing that big shift. I see there's a real, that's something that's going to resonate. And I think, again, if you're an investor, if you're a big institutional investor, yeah, getting returns is also important, but using that capital and directing it to entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers. So if we're directing it to problem solvers who are going to solve these problems, because listen, once COVID's over, and I hope it will be over, it will be over. We're going to get to climate change that we haven't talked about, pollution, inequality in education, access to opportunities, still all these problems. And so again, we've met some startups that are trying to make a change. So we've come across, for example, an insurtech company, right? If you're a Grab driver right now, do you know how hard it is to get insurance? Because insurance companies traditionally have just taken it as a once a year payment. A lot of the Grab drivers or delivery people, they can't even pay that on an annual basis. So there are startups that are offering the insurance on a metering basis, pay by day. Isn't that a great idea? You're really solving some pain points for some of the key frontliners who are doing some of the most essential jobs for society during COVID. And that's the type of innovation I think we need more of. And you're starting to see that, right? It was happening already. I think COVID accelerates that. And I think all four of us here are big believers in how do we do more around sustainability, ESG, because the problems after COVID are only going to be there, and they're probably even more severe, and we're going to have to deal with that.
No, I think it's very interesting that you're saying this, because actually a lot of people looked at COVID and as the trigger for the first sustainability crisis of the 21st century, because we have seen an unprecedented amount of investments going into ESG funds globally. And it was interesting to see the link, which I hadn't made, Tom, that also from a VC perspective. I think that the whole shift in ESG, the whole shift to purpose, which I think a lot of the big corporates embraced. And I think we've seen more governments and large corporates shifting towards ESG now than ever before. But so
yeah, Nick, if I can add one comment to that, look, I know the big institutions, right? And you've got big college endowments that are always raising more money from alumni, right? I'm sure you get it as well. And they're always saying, we need more money for the rainy day. And I keep, one time I asked one of them and they didn't have an answer for it. So I think it was a good question. I'm like, hey, if we don't isn't that rainy day today? What are we saving it for? Why not start using it to get let's get some solutions. What are we saving it for? Is that rainy day not already here? Because, you could be the richest endowment or foundation when the world ends, and you're not going to win any prizes for that.
That's so funny, dude. That's great, man. What was their response?
They're just like, oh, donate more money. Yeah, it's a good question while we answer that, but in the meantime, donate more money, right?
Right. Dr. Nikolai, if I may, I'm glad Tom, you took this in this direction, because it's not as easy as well for VCs to do to make that transition for a lot of our investors. There is a period, right? And I won't speak for the rest of my panelists, but I'll speak for our kind of caution for ourselves, because when 2 years ago, we're like, all right, we're gonna make the step to enforce that any company who takes a check from us has to have an ESG policy of their own that's well-defined, has to have an ESG officer, and we'll have to go through mandatory ESG training, right? So when that was proposed, right, amongst our partnership. We're like, oh, I don't know. What if like founders just don't want that mess? I mean, aren't they young? Don't they have other things to do as like seed companies and whatnot, right? But we came around on the opposite. Like, say, hey, if you're not going to install ESG thinking when you're just starting up, like you want to install it just before you go IPO, you know how painful that process is right now for a lot of companies. So you got to start them young, right? Number two is that like, if we can lower the barrier of onboarding to ESG, then it'll be easy, right? So those investments paid off. And right now, I'm proud to say that 2 of our funds, our Southeast Asia funds right now, like no company is getting a check from us unless they got ESG, full stop, right? And it's okay to start from a position where it's still, at baby steps on ESG, but let's build it out together. Let's talk about what it means to you, because what ESG means to each company is very different, right? But it's important, at least we have the conversation, we install the metrics, and we just get this show on the road.
Amazing. Great to hear. So we're slowly coming sort of to the end of our session. And I have to say, I really enjoy the energy. And so I took away a few things which I think was very encouraging for me. As some of you know, I've been here for 25 years, very passionate about Malaysia. And it was good to hear sort of how you see Malaysia. I think I just repeat a few things which I heard from you. Not too big, not too small, sort of like Goldilocks size. You didn't use Goldilocks, but and really sort of a good ecosystem brings the right diversity, so you can really use it as a regional platform, which I think always was Malaysia's value proposition. But I think it's good to hear that it's coming to fruition. What is even better to hear is that I think we believe, I think Tom, you pointed out, we see South Asia and therefore Malaysia in particular as beneficiary of the global trade wars and the shift in the ecosystems. And of course, I think Khailee, you pointed out, and several of you, I think the prevalence of Malaysian talent in some of the really promising companies, or not as promising, in some of the hugely successful companies. And I think there seems to be now sort of a real belief and opportunity that this will flow back into Malaysia. I think it's good to hear, and I'm really looking forward to tasting the 2014 vintage, obviously. But maybe final words from you, not from me. But so maybe what is your one piece of recommendation or advice to even further strengthen the Malaysian startup scene? And maybe let's go around, maybe start with you, Jeffrey, and then Victor, then Thomas, Khailee.
I think I'll just do kind of high level stuff. So for the governments, you guys have to understand that within SMEs in general, only 1% actually should raise money from us, which means if you focus your entire campaign or budget to address things that comes to us, then you forget about the 99%. Right, so there are $1 million companies that are doing fine. There are multiple dev shops that are doing fine, and they also require some help sometimes. Right, sometimes it's financing. So that's my first thing. Second thing is that there are things that are available already. I think whoever is in Malaysia that wants to help build the ecosystem, I think the government should kind of sort it out and bring them all together. It's very simple. You guys have to know something people don't know, right? To me, the answer is in data. There's enough of 15 years of data, whether startups or otherwise, financing or otherwise, that should give you some clues on how to do this. So you don't have to do too much, right? I think the answers are already on the floor. They are already on the ground in KL. They are already in the region. They are willing to help you. We are always here to kind of give our 2 cents. And yeah, my wife's Malaysian, right? She's a proud graduate of SMK Convent in Batu Pahat, so I'm a Batu Pahat fan. So I'm here to help as well.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Victor.
Yeah, am I losing audio? Is it me?
No, Victor, you were muffled a bit.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Can you see me better right now?
Yeah, good.
Okay, cool. I'll just go straight to the point then. So one of the earlier discussion points that we talked about is talent, but I think Khailee had great points. I think everyone talked about it as well. But one area of talent which we did not pay attention to as a market, as Malaysia, is the talent around VC. How many actual VC investment professionals are there in Malaysia? I mean, I'm lucky because I got trained by Khailee and then Tom. So, and Math Camp obviously trained me up as well. But how many other victors are there in Malaysia that has access to this knowledge? Do they even get to speak to Tom, to Khailee, to Jeff, on a casual basis to learn from the job? There's just not enough attention on that. For us, we're trying to do our part as well. We work with 3 universities in Malaysia to provide VC trainings or courses, I mean, in a small way, to hopefully train up more young graduates who actually want to become a VC, or at least to learn more about the VC as an industry. Because as good as we have entrepreneurs from Malaysia, we have Malaysian entrepreneurs who has great business ideas or who has done well for themselves. We need to close the loop. Because otherwise, all these companies would have to go out there to fundraise from Singapore, from Indonesia, from wherever it is. It's not a bad thing to raise money from overseas, but it's definitely going to make their life much easier if they can raise money from local VCs as well. Which is why my main recommendation to Malaysia and its ecosystem is to actually empower local VCs, train out more local VCs, build them up so that they become great partners for Gobi, for Golden Gate, for Foreign Startup, or whoever it is who wants to invest into the local ecosystem.
Thanks, Victor. Tom.
Yeah, I would just say that, again, I know a lot of the Malaysian institutional investors may have been burned in the past, but I think this time is different, right? So especially on the tech side, I think COVID really pulled forward the future. And if anything, it demonstrated that VC investing is not so risky, right? When there's a COVID going on, where do you want to be? Do you want to be in physical retail stores, shopping malls, or do you want to be in the e-commerce companies, right? Do you want to be in the office building space, or do you want to be in prop tech, right? Do you want to be actually owning restaurants or the food delivery companies? Do you want to own a hospital, or do you want to be in the telemedicine? So I think before the arguments were, VC is just so risky. If anything, COVID has proven that not only is VC not risky in a way, but can generate higher returns, it's absolutely essential to your portfolio, right? So I think the COVID is, I mean, for all of us here, it's been the ultimate proof point that technology is the one thing that can overcome a lot of the volatility in the market. So my only advice would be, hey, listen, sometimes you think the grass is greener on the other side, and I'm an American, so I can say this. Americans, the Silicon Valley guys, the New York Wall Street bankers, they're so good at marketing. But again, Malaysia's got great companies as well. You don't have to invest in the US to get those same type of tech exposure, or even in China. You can get it in Malaysia or in Southeast Asia. But sometimes, the grass is greener, right? A tech unicorn in the US, just, there's still sometimes that perception issue.
Thanks, Tom. Khailee.
Okay. Malaysia, I'm going to bounce off Tom's point, Malaysia has its own path. And if we're following just the US or even just China, you tend to feel like you want to mirror everything they do because they produce these good things. But you realize that a lot of their cities are choked. Especially in China, there's a lot of cities who are choking, right? Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur is not choking yet. So if we kind of move in a direction of they're doing good things, just do everything they're doing, right? You're going to get similar results. Now, one thing that's missing from this panel that I want to end with is the opportunity for rural digitization. The next 2 billion smartphones in the next 3 years, based on our research that's coming on board, they're all going to be rural, okay? Because folks that are as privileged as, folks on this panel, we may have more than one smartphone, but the next 2 billion smartphones are going to be all rural. And it ties into sustainable cities and sustainable development of the country as well. Because when you get all of the information, you can get your work done, you can get all your e-commerce, you can get all the goods you want. Why are you living in a small little apartment in, say, XYZ city, when you can be chilling out in Batu Pahat or Ipoh or somewhere else? And I know some entrepreneurs like Ipoh, I got one of my probably, they're Ipoh right now running the company, right? Close to parents, right? But they still can run the entire company. Wouldn't it be a great world where we reverse urbanization so our cities don't choke, that we can actually live and work anywhere? So rural digitization will create so much a surge of economic activity and livelihood into the rest of the world and to the rest of the people in any given country. So it's going to make a lot of money because a lot of today's big unicorns, so much of the business depends on rural. So pensions and investors here, you can not only make a ton of money, you can put your country on track as to where it's being developed economically, and you can involve so many people, right, in a more inclusive economy. Like, this is a great time, right? It is the rainy day right now, Tom. So I think that let's get busy, let's get building, let's get investing.
Thanks, Khailee. Wonderful last words. So unfortunately, we're now at the end of the session. So this has been most exciting. I really appreciate, I think, the energy, I think the clearness and the straightforwardness of your perspective. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me as moderator as well. And back to the organizer, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Wow, that was interesting indeed. Thank you, Dr. Nikolai, for that session with our 4 panel members. Right, up next, we have the CEO of Cradle Fund Sendirian Berhad, Ms. Rafiza Ghazali, presenting on looking for Malaysia's next unicorn. Over to you, Ms. Rafiza.